with an almost one-year-old child, the book reading in my house is rather simple these days. My daughter, Maya's favorite book at the moment is Polar Bear, What Do You Hear? It's one of many great books to come from Eric Carle. It's a story about hearing. And it goes like this. Polar Bear, what do you hear? I hear a lion roaring in my ear. Lion, what do you hear? I hear a hippopotamus snorting in my ear. Hippopotamus, what do you hear? I hear I think you get the pattern by now. Maya wants to read the book 3 times in a row every time she picks it up, which I love, not only because I get to make animal sounds, but because it's a book about listening, about paying attention. And we need so many reminders to pay attention. At this time of year, one symbol in particular reminds us to listen and pay attention: the shofar. We blow the shofar every day of Elul, that month that leads up to Rosh Hashanah, and then on Rosh Hashanah we blow the shofar 100 times. The loudest part of our high holidays is a call to listen. Well, you might think the mitzvah, the commandment, is to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. That is not the case. The mitzvah is actually for us to hear the sound of the shofar. So what is so important for us to hear? Beth Huppen, an amazing educator here in Seattle, teaches that our Jewish tradition understands the blast of the shofar as cries. Whose cries do we need to heed right now? This past year, I sought out cries of pain experienced in Jewish communities, and I was overwhelmed by what I found. Rabbi Sandra Lawson is a Black gay woman. She shared last year, and I quote, "I have never been in a Jewish space where my identity has not been questioned," end quote. Every time she is in a Jewish space, her identity is questioned. Hearing that makes me so sad. It pleads with me to pay attention to the experience of others in the Jewish community. Like the blast of the shofar, hearing her story shocks me into attention. The blasts from the shofar are meant to shock us and call us to attention. Beth Huppen continues, illuminating how our tradition connects the shofar with cries. She teaches that one connection can be traced to the very Torah portion we read on Rosh Hashanah. You might be familiar with the story. Abraham leaves with his son Isaac to follow God's commands. He brings wood to burn and a knife with which to sacrifice Isaac to God. Sarah, Abraham's wife, knows the horrific end that may be in store and cries out with the piercing sound of the shofar in the midst of her pain and grief. Another explanation Beth teaches says the shofar is the sound of Sisera's mother crying out when she realizes her son will not return from battle. Though Sisera was the commander of the Israelites' enemy's army, from his mother's perspective, his death was a tragedy. As Beth describes it, according to this tradition, when we hear the cry of the shofar, our hearts open as we remember that our enemies are individuals, each person someone's child. The blasts of the shofar, our tradition teaches, are the cries of people in pain. Sometimes the cries are from people we love. And other times, the shofar awakens us to the pain of people from whom we are distanced. Beth challenges us, stating, the sound of the shofar calls, asking every one of us, whose voice and whose pain is hardest for you to hear? Why? People across the Jewish community are crying out, and it's up to us to pay attention. Rabbi Lauren Tuckman, who is blind, shared about her experiences in Jewish spaces that were not designed for her in an Eli talk. Think a TED Talk for Jewish content. She said, I often find myself in synagogue or in a Beit Midrash, and I'll have a Braille Siddur with me. And somebody will come over to me and ask me about whether or not that's Hebrew, or say, wow, that's so cool, you can read that. And though those comments are coming from a well-intentioned place, they can often feel very othering, because the underlying message, which is not heard only by folks who are blind like myself, but by many other Jews with disabilities, is that there's one correct way to access information, one correct way to be Jewish. The shofar cries out for our Jewish spaces to be accessible to everyone. Too often, Jews in Jewish spaces are told they do not belong. Sometimes that sounds like the words Katie Simpson heard due to her red hair and pale skin. Oh, you're Jewish? Or, I didn't realize you were Jewish. Or, really? You don't look Jewish. Those same words and more are lobbed against Jews of color, including questions that Ethiopian Jew Isaac Ofori Solomon has been asked, like, when did you convert? Or, are you adopted? And sometimes it's worse, as Isaac shared, like when your mother is harassed by a random security guard as she picks you up from working Sunday school at the JCC. The police harass you following a cousin's bar mitzvah. These are just some of the forms of harassment that I and my loved ones have experienced in spaces where all Jews are supposed to be able to safely congregate. The shofar cries out, reminding us that Jews come in all hues. There are too many types of Jews for me to share a story from each. And that's the point. We know that Jews are not a monolith. We have varied practices, beliefs, and approaches. We look different, and we eat a variety of foods. We have different ability levels. Some of us here at Temple are from the Seattle area, and some of us are new to the area. Some come from multi-faith or multi-heritage families, and some are themselves in a multi-faith or multi-heritage relationship. Some of us are not Jewish and are raising Jewish children. Many of us are Jews by birth, and many of us are Jews by choice. Yet, all too often, one story is told about who Jews are. And it's dangerous to tell a single story. In telling a single story, we erase the multitude of Jewish experiences and alienate those who cannot find themselves in that story. And so the shofar keeps calling out, and we have to keep listening and making sure our Jewish spaces reflect and welcome each and every Jew and Jew-adjacent person, because that is what a community does. Here at Temple, a group of us is setting out to do just that. We call ourselves the Justice League. Yes, like the comic books. We are a team of members and myself who are working to bring more justice to our world. Like the mitzvah to hear the shofar, we want to listen to our community and hear your cries. I'm sure that for many of us, it's hard to imagine people feeling alienated in spaces in which we feel so at home and so comfortable. Yet, I am also sure there are those who experience the hurtful comments from the stories I shared. Either way, we want to know. To make it easy for you to share your stories, soon after Yom Kippur, we'll be sending out a short questionnaire for everyone at Temple to fill out. In it, we'll invite you to share a bit about your experiences at Temple and a bit about yourself. The questionnaire is only the first part of our quest to elicit stories. We'll use the next few months to gather stories. We are hoping many of you will be willing to sign up for small group discussions or to share one-on-one. We want to hear from everyone, And that includes people of marginalized groups, including people of color, LGBTQ folks, Jews by choice, Jews with disabilities, and people in multi-faith or multi-heritage families. We plan on using your stories to help us shape our community so that our spaces welcome each and every Jew and Jew-adjacent person. May we listen with intention to the calls of the shofar. May we open our hearts to each other's cries. And may we ensure that everyone feels safe in our community. Gamar Chatima Tova, may you be sealed for a good year.